There's a couple of things at least that I would like to keep on voting. I think that the winner is pretty obvious there. So audience seems to agree what Justin said, that okay, we need email style scalability. Would you like to elaborate, like what do we need? Like Justin already mentioned something, but others also. So how do we get there? How can we have a technical stack on user-managed personal data, human-centric personal data that actually reaches the email scale? How do we do it?
Can I actually follow up? Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. A corollary to that is how can we actually reach the scale of email without inheriting all of the problems of email, like spam and unsolicited messages and things like that? Because I've heard it said once that you know, there's really no difference between unsolicited incoming messages and interoperability. That I think is kind of the bigger question.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'd like to hear what.
I mean, for me, when I think of we need email scale, things like HTTP and SMTP as protocols didn't come from the big players in computing at the time. They may have been involved, but there were a lot of people working in their home office and working on these things for a very long time. And I think one of the challenges right now, and they came about without huge investment from venture capital and private equity and other folks. So I think one of the challenges right now, particularly when I think about VRM, is how do we change the way a marketplace works without creating new silos in the process? And that's going to be a progression over time. You're going to have vertical markets of VRM. You're going to have a VRM, in my mind, and thinking about the future, you're going to have a VRM for travel and a VRM for cars and whatever else. And over time, the web will be scale as opposed to the individual silos. But that's an evolution.
Okay, Markus, do you want to comment?
So I don't really like the way the lesson is written here. We need email style scalability. Sean was talking exactly about the kind of language that vendors use with the digestive system and the language of slavery and so on. And this is exactly something an executive of a large organization would say. I don't think if we want to work on Mydata and sovereign identity and user empowerment, we should not say we need email style scalability. That will come if we manage to build something that really works for people. So that should be the first question, and not how do we market and promote and.
Good.
Yeah, I think I would actually agree with that lesson. I think that is just not about the scalability and the email style scalability, but the email style ease of use. So just being able to provide some sort of technology or technological solutions that can be adopted as easily as email has been. So either you deploy your own system, as Justin once had, at home, or you just switch to something which is provided by an organization of your choice, and take it from there. So.
Petri, if you can scroll back a little bit down, we have still, yeah. So that the blockchain will not be a solution after all in this domain. Will not be the solution, and then the scoring is quite low. So it's clearly, and if I look at the more detailed data, so we see that it's fairly high variance there. So people disagree a lot now with whether it's to go to blockchain direction or not. Some say that definitely no, that's really scary. Cybersecurity, even going into sort of energy costs that blockchain costs and so on. So there's a lot of debate on that side that in order to reach email scale with the blockchain, there's no go. Then again, we have heard like how XDI, ProjectVRM, you're looking on the blockchain, then OpenIDConnect, Oauth, they are definitely some kind of, I would say that at the moment, how they are positioned, they are different ball games. So your reflections, blockchain or not, how are these pieces fitting together?
I mean, we talked about that yesterday in the blockchain session. I think it's not completely clear that there are many questions. Which blockchain do you use? Is it public? Is it private, permissioned, non-permissioned, what consensus algorithm does it use, and what do you store on the blockchain. You don't want to store your profile, my phone number, I don't want to store that on the blockchain, but there are many potential other things. I may want to store cryptographic materials or service endpoints or the J-Link agreements or proof of transactions, something like that, but we still have to figure it out. We don't know.
Justin?
Well, first off, to get to a bit what Markus was just saying, there isn't the blockchain. There are lots of different blockchains. There are also blockchain-like things out there that are other distributed ledgers. And so, which one are you using? Are you using the Bitcoin one, which is currently controlled by a Chinese mining oligarchy? Or are you using a different one that, so there's the, what's the runtime platform one? I'm totally blanking on the name.
Ethereum?
Ethereum, yes. So are you using the Ethereum one, which has, quicker turnaround time, less proof of work, and all this other stuff? What I think is important, and, those of you that may know me from other talks and stuff, I say things like this all the time just to get conversations started. Because ultimately I believe that we do need to do the experiments to figure out what the blockchain is good for and what it's bad for. And I think so far a lot of the experimentation we're seeing is we're figuring out what it's really, really bad at. And that's important. It's really important that we do that as technologists and as a community. So the way that I see it, I think it's going to fail spectacularly. And I can't wait to see how it fails, so that we can figure out what to build next. Oauth has failed spectacularly in a number of ways. That's, all of the stuff that was built on top of the base specification is because Oauth really screwed up a bunch of stuff in the core spec. And we added other stuff to kind of make it better, right? And there will be something that will come and sweep Oauth off the radar, and when we have long forgotten that, what the big deal with REST and JSON ever was, like why were people ever doing things that were that dumb, right? Once we've forgotten all of that, there will be some other security protocol that everybody's using, and Oauth is going to be this weird, quaint little thing. I can't wait for that. I think that's fantastic, and I think that that's the nature of technology. I think that that's what we need to move for. I really look forward to seeing how things break. That's how I approach things like this. So that's why I say that blockchain is not the solution. It may be a solution to some limited problems. It actually is a pretty cryptographically elegant solution to double spending problem of a pseudocurrency. And I know there's a lot of qualifications in that statement. Sure. But I think it does some really interesting things, and it has some really interesting aspects that we can learn from. That said, I don't think it's going to live up to all of the curing cancer hype that it's been granted by sort of general media reports and whatnot.
Do you want to still comment on?
Yeah, sure. So blockchain, small b, whatever it ends up being is a tool. It's one gear, and this isn't a fine Swiss timepiece. This is a gigantic sawmill, and this is one gear that might be replaced by something else. Years ago, we had literally wars over messaging standards. And right now, one of the top messaging standards is a completely closed silo called WhatsApp, and they're through. So we owe these like cycles of openness and closed and decompression, compression. I think to your point, Mydata 2026, we might have drinks and toast. Remember the blockchain 10 years ago? It was awesome. It might be something else, but I think it fits one part for what we're trying to do. J-Link stuff may disappear in 6 months. Or J-Link may be perfect for this chunk of VRM that people build businesses off of. I can't tell.
Just a very quick comment. Yeah, I would agree that it's just a part of the solution. It's definitely not the solution. So.
One last question I want to ask from you is about the community building. I asked about it you already earlier, and all of you are representing different technically oriented community. And already in the talks, sort of the interaction, the participation, like Doc mentioned in the morning, is important. So how do we make those communities more accessible? How do we converge those communities better? Because I guess that's the better way to ensure the sort of common principles and interoperability. So what kind of sort of social actions are needed?
I think for a very long time, VRM was a mailing list. And with the exception of meetings at Harvard, like we never actually saw each other in real space until IIW. And now, you know, every year at IIW, or every session at IIW, not every year, the first day, the Monday, so IIW is like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the Monday is a VRM day. And then we spend the rest of our time at IIW. I might go to one of Justin's sessions, I'll go to Markus's session. Some things I bring VRM to, or I just sit and listen because I want to learn something that these guys are working on. But it's about, you can be a lurker and learn a ton. Like, and if you just want to lurk, that's great. Because that's education. And then for me, that's where most of community building is.
So I would say, you know, a lot of the work that I do for my day job is engagement with the kind of the wider standards communities, the IETF, the OpenID Foundation, Kantara Initiative, others. And they are really kind of caustic and combative places because people are coming in with, you know, certain assumptions about how the world works. They're coming in with goals that they're trying to get across and get sort of ensconced in standards and things like that. And it's not easy for new people to get into that space. That said, I think it is very, very important for new people to get into that space because it's only when we've got a very diverse and engaged set of stakeholders and contributors in a community do we have something that actually works for lots of people. Because you know, I don't care how you know, cosmopolitan you consider yourself to be, you have biases. You have all sorts of assumptions that you're making, especially when you're going into building a technical system. You know, you could sit down and write something as a Python program and say, see, it's easy, I wrote it in 20 minutes, it's great. And then it's like, okay, that might be like completely impossible to implement in, I don't know, Swift or whatever the language du jour is. And without even realizing that, you know, some simple and arbitrary decision you made over here is making it completely untenable for somebody else. And until those people with that expertise and those biases come to the table, you're never going to realize that. And that's happened with a lot of protocols that I've seen. And somebody actually brought up the question during my talk, you know, how much have Microsoft and Facebook influenced OAuth? I think that was a really, really interesting battle to watch play out and to participate in. Because if there weren't a bunch of other people at the table beyond Facebook and OAuth, OAuth 2 would look very, very different today. It would be focused on just massive scale and, you know, like enterprise-only deployments like SAML and Kerberos and other protocols that came before were. And it was really only the influence of this wider internet community that made OAuth what it is today. And I would argue made it the success that it is today.
Great. Quick comments for Maciej and Markus still about the community building.
Of course, I mean, for me, like the really important part is what Justin said, is that the ability to get new people and get their insights into, you know, whatever the process is. Like in UMA, we have to have like new perspectives from people who are building new systems, who are building new software, and who have new use cases which in many cases they become like the prominent ones, like they actually give us like new information what the protocol should look like, because if we don't solve it right now, you know, few months down the line we will have, or we will stumble upon a new problem that will you know, make the protocol obsolete and will be, you know, necessary just to re-implement or redefine certain things. So engagement of new people, that's really important. And through, in our case, it's not just the mailing list. It's a lot of like conference calls, but the meetings that we have and the meetings that we have at IIW or close to IIW, these are probably the most efficient ways of, you know, pushing the standards forward through, you know, by the community that we have.
Last words from Mark.
First, quick clarification that some of there were two lessons on the screen that said Miko has an XDI API and Cozy Cloud has an XDI API. That's not true. Maybe I failed to explain that correctly. What I was showing and explaining was that with XDI you can also address and work with data that does not itself support XDI. But they don't do that, which also, which brings me to your question. There is almost no community about XDI right now. There are a lot of people who have tried it and looked at it and rejected it. The thing to do is to be honest, to admit mistakes, right? I didn't come here and give a sales pitch telling everybody that XDI is the solution for everything, but I openly admitted it has been a disaster so far, but I also sit here with all my courage and self-confidence and say that there are some things in it that it has done right and that other things right now cannot do yet. So what the thing to do is to learn and evolve and be honest and not build a technological silo. And we all know each other. We work well as a community, and we all want the same thing, to make the Mydata a reality.
Great, thanks a lot. All talk. And the next